You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Hello everyone and welcome to this special episode that's being produced jointly for sister shows Meet the Farmers podcast and Rural Business Focus podcast. Yes, we brought them together, listeners. So welcome whether you're listening to this on Meet the Farmers or Rural Business Focus. For today's episode, I went along to the fantastically inspiring Cultivate conference, which took place last week near Macclesfield. Cultivate is designed as a business growth conference for the UK's rural and agricultural sectors, featuring industry experts and entrepreneurs. It was my third time at the event, and it certainly lived up to the previous two, I think. To introduce Cultivate, I spoke to co-founder Andy Venables, and I started by asking him to tell me what the event is all about.
Well, Cultivate is all about building and inspiring people that work in agriculture to develop better leaders. Myself and business partner Simon Haley came up with the brainchild back in 2020. We just felt agriculture was missing support in terms of building and developing leaders. Alongside my digital marketing business, Hills Green, we've taken the bull by the horns and really started to grow it as what will hopefully be an annual event.
Yeah, and it's quite unique, isn't it? You sort of think of agri-leader perhaps with the HDB, but it's pretty uniquely placed when you think of agricultural events.
Yeah, I mean, we like to be different. So the theme of agriculture, we've got people from whole spectrum in terms of those people involved in farming or professional services or the food industry. I suppose what brings them together is they have a growth mindset and they really want to invest in themselves and develop. And the speakers that we bring external speakers from outside the sector to talk about business and leadership, and then throw in some rural success stories. So we've got Tom Warner from Warner's Gin, and we've got Jim Bloom, who is the founder of Warrendale Farming, speaking this afternoon. And it's just great to see how they've built their business and how they've, I suppose, built their resilience. And that is the theme of the conference today, is rooted in resilience. How can we help develop resilience within our industry to ultimately build those better leaders?
Yeah, I mean, within that theme, we still have challenging times within the industry. I'm looking forward to a stage when we can maybe say that it's less challenging, but within that as well, yes, let's talk about resilience, because those are the roots that we're talking about. What is your sort of take on the climate for rural business farmers at the moment?
I mean, it's challenging. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. You know, you just look at the spring we've had with the weather from a on-farm situation. Cash is tight on farm. You know, people are looking at how they can maybe work smarter and in different ways. But I think there's always going to be challenges in this sector. It was really interesting listening to Paul McGee this morning in terms of the event doesn't always equal the outcome. It's how you respond to that event, and I think that's a big takeaway for me in terms of, yeah, there's going to be stuff out of your control like the weather, but how do we respond to it, and that'll ultimately give you the outcome.
What would you like people going away today to take with them?
Well, ultimately to feel that they've had a day well spent. You know, they're giving up their time out of their business to work on themselves. So, you know, at least a couple of things they feel that they can go and take away and do differently, whether it's personally or in their business, off the back of attending today.
Yeah. Just finally, a comment. I mean, at Hills Green, you work with quite a wide selection of different businesses. We don't often get political on the podcast, but we do have an election coming up at some point, and the rural vote's going to be interesting to see what it is. But what could move rural business to the next stage to actually put it in the best place for growth moving forward? If you could call for one thing, what would that be?
I think whoever is in government, for them to value British farmers and food production. You know, we saw what happened with Brexit, we've seen what's happened with the war in Ukraine, and it has started to hit home a little, I feel, in terms of making sure that we've got good domestic food production, so we ultimately not having to rely so much on imports. But I think that is short-lived. Empty shelves spurs a response. But when the shelves are full, I think it's easily forgotten. So I actually want the politicians to believe in what they're saying and really back our farmers and back British farming and food production.
Yeah. Well, Andy, congratulations on the conference, and thank you so much for having me today.
Thanks, Ben.
Andy Venables, the co-founder of the conference. One of the things I most enjoy when I go to events like Cultivate is the networking opportunities and meeting new people, and Cultivate is brilliant in that it attracts a wide variety of different rural businesses, as well as farming and the direct supporting businesses to agriculture. I asked a few people why they had decided to go along.
Ed Turner, it is my first time here. Been invited along by Ashbrooks, as I do a lot of electrical work for those, and I'm a young business, I guess, looking to expand elsewhere and get some advice along the way. Yeah. And I believe this is where to get it.
We've only had one session so far. Paul speaking this morning. What was your take on that?
Yeah, pretty good. Quite interesting, really. As a director of my own company, it's nice to see and listen to how leadership could work. So yeah, it's pretty good.
I'm Jen Johnson. I'm from Afterbond Accountants in Nantwich. Come to Cultivate today. We got recommended via solicitor. We deal with a lot of agricultural clients at work, so we thought it might be a good opportunity for us to come, do a lot of networking, find out more about the industry in different areas, and everything that Cultivate's got to offer. And so far it's been great, so hopefully more to come this afternoon.
Rob Brown from RB Rural. And I'm here with the SRH Agribusiness team, who I do some consultancy for, and they've kindly invited me along to join them. It's my second time at Cultivate, and we've just finished the session with the sumo guy, and there's far too many things to take away, but I think the 7 rules that we've just gone through, the questions really, and like we were just saying, it's the obvious stuff.
Yeah. It really is, though. I mean, it is pointing out the obvious, but actually reflecting on that, and that's a big part of what today is. If there's one thing that you could really take away from the sessions so far from the morning, what would it be?
I think it's the reaction to things. It's not so much we're talking about a scale of 1 to 10, sort of how desperate is it, but it's taking that time to react. It's okay to have your immediate gut reaction that you can't control, but it's what you do in response to that. And that's fair enough. Take that ownership and think a bit more about it. I think that's something I'll be taking away.
I'm Joe Fletcher Hunt. I'm from Aaron and Partners Solicitors in Chester, and I'm a property lawyer. I came over to basically learn more about the sector, meet new people, and I suppose exchange ideas. I think the motivational talks and workshops we've had today have been really good, and one of the things I think I've learned is it's all about perspective, in terms of we've all got different skill sets, different experiences, and coming together to places like this, you exchange them without even knowing it. Like this interview, for example, it's just going further and further afield.
So I'm Ady Street. I'm the head of strategy and commercial for Hills Green. So I work really closely with the team, and obviously Hills Green is a founding member, if you like, of the Cultivate conference, and we get quite heavily involved. I think from my point of view, the Cultivate conference aligns really nicely with Hills Green itself. So something that's really core to what Hills Green's about is championing the industry, trying to drive it forwards, helping it modernise, and we do that through digital marketing, and we do that through how we communicate and how we learn and how we educate and work between farmers and businesses. But this is another level of being able to give back, I think, to the industry, and that's a key thing for me as somebody who's part of the Hills Green business is how do we give back, and in a way that it adds value to the industry. It doesn't always have to be about business and growth and that kind of thing. It's about actually how can we use a bit of what we've learned to support the industry. And I think you go to any other industry anywhere else, these things are commonplace, but actually for the farming industry they're very rare. And I think farming now has got to a point where they are businesses. They need to be run like businesses. Yes, there's the family aspect, there's the personal aspect to them, and that's what makes them really quite unique and exciting. But bringing in some of this expertise can have some real value, especially as we go through some quite challenging times, I think.
A big part of attending Cultivate is being inspired by the speakers, and the event was opened by best-selling author and expert in human behaviour and performance, Paul McGee. I spoke to Paul once he had left the stage. I am with Paul McGee, who was our first speaker at the conference today. Just saying to Paul, I had a load of questions and I've listened to what you've been saying. I was really inspired and I've changed my questions. So first of all, I just wanted to pick up on what you were saying about celebrating success. And this is something that we talk about a lot on the podcast, about celebrating those moments. But today you were just saying, in essence, about celebrating turning up today, because a lot of the people here, they're taking a day out of a very busy schedule, especially if they're farming as well. We've got a nice dry day, which hasn't happened a lot. So they're actually taking that day to spend some time on themselves. Why is that important? And why is celebrating success important?
I mean, people are spending a lot of time in the business, but today's about working on yourself. Because we can, whatever kind of part of the sector we're involved in, we can be so busy and firefighting and take a little bit of time out for ourselves, because we talk about this word sustainability. But how do we sustain our success? How do we sustain and maintain our well-being and our motivation? How do we, in this industry, like a lot of others, sometimes recruitment and retention can be a challenge, and it gives people an opportunity just to look holistically at themselves and their business and their lives. And I've just provided them with a set of tools and ideas and some space to think about, how do I get the best out of myself, get the best out of others, and get the best out of life? It's one day. And I appreciate there's other things people could have done today, but these days don't turn up very often. And it is an opportunity to network and to reflect on yourself and what do you actually want to achieve in your business and through your people. And you don't get that opportunity very often.
Yeah, this actually reflection on self was a big thing that I took away, and it was something that I was so pleased that you picked up on, especially no matter what role you have in that organisation, in that business, you are important. I think that was such a great message to see.
Well, I do. I talk about everyone's mad, everyone makes a difference. But going on to why we celebrate success, I do, as someone who runs my own small business, the enemy of success to me is complacency. And I've done well, and I've written a lot of books, spoken in a lot of countries, but I always want to keep hungry and, what's next? And yet, sometimes, therefore, I haven't always taken time to pause and gone, think of the journey you've been on. And maybe you don't have to sort of bathe in success, your own success, and celebrate it for a long time, but just acknowledge you've done a flipping good job. There are people listening to this programme who... People have got employment because you took some risks and done what you've done. I have people who work for me whose lives have been transformed by the income they now have. And so sometimes it's nice to sort of sit back, not with be just self-congratulatory, that's easy for me to say, but just go, I'll toast life, I'll celebrate. I've had some success, and my success has brought success to other people as well.
Yeah. A key theme we're talking about today is resilience, which is a bit of a buzzword, and it is. Sure. I think it's perhaps a little bit overused sometimes, but you call yourself the Mancunian motivator. Yeah. So, in Mancunian style, what is resilience to you?
It is actually the ability, I suppose, to carry on. Now, that doesn't mean that no matter what life throws at you, you just simply, I'll press on anyway. Some of my material today looked at a hippo time is okay. What a hippo's doing, would they wallow? So you might want to, how do you carry on? How do you pick yourself up? Sometimes you pick yourself up by allowing yourself to feel a bit down. It's okay to not always feel okay, but it's temporary. It's a detour, not a destination. So I'm looking at a lot of different ideas, not in the happy clappy, I'm a tiger, rah, rah kind of way. But let's be realistic. Life does throw us some challenges, and it's the people who are resilient who say, I'm going to move forward, but I might need some support and I might need to have a bit of hippo time. But ultimately, I will go again. Not in order to burn myself out, but learn how to burn bright, not burn out. So it's overused. It's become very much the thing of the moment, resilience. But actually, for our own success in life, it is an important trait to develop.
Another thing you spoke about was this idea of emotional investment. and I think this is particularly true for family businesses. There are a lot of family businesses out there in the farming community. So I was interested in how this idea of emotional investment and emotion versus your rational thinking when it comes to decision making. What is that role? What impact does that emotional investment have for family businesses?
I think it can sometimes make things harder. I mean, if you're a family member, and I've got a family business, my wife works in the business, she'll go the extra mile because in a sense she sees the fruit of what we achieve. But it can also mean that my relationship with her in a work context, let's say it can be fraught at times. I mean, I wrote a book called How to Succeed with People. My wife said to me recently, you should read that sometime. And I think, but what it can mean is you don't allow yourself to ever switch onto something else. It can consume you. And I think sometimes our decisions just become much more emotional because of our emotional investment. It's our business. And also perhaps if you're for second generation, you think back to how maybe other family members in the past did things and you feel, am I being disloyal to them that I now want to adapt and innovate and maybe change how we did things? What would my father say? What would my grandfather and my grandmother say? And so it does come with its challenges, which we need to be aware of, that are very different if it wasn't a family-run business.
Yeah, interesting. One final thing, because you and I both want to go to lunch. You covered a lot of ground in your presentation today. If there was one thing, just one thing that you would like people who are here today and people who haven't been able to come along today to take away, what would that be?
I think it would be the point I started off with, E plus R equals O. It is the event, but it's also our response that influences the outcome. Life is not E equals O. It's not, if that's the event, you know what the outcome's going to be. We, you, me are in the equation. Our response, whatever that response is, matters and can influence our outcomes. So sometimes we've got to acknowledge we can't always control the external event. The only thing we can control is our response to it. Work on that response and you'll often end up with better outcomes.
Yeah, such an important message. Paul, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Meet the Farmers is brought to you by RuralPod Media, the only podcast production agency to specialise in the rural sector. We're on a mission to make rural stories mainstream and help businesses, organisations and communities like you tell your story through podcasting. Podcasting is a fantastic way of connecting with your audience, whoever that might be, getting your message out there and networking with leaders in your niche. RuralPod Media can help you by launching your new podcast or helping you with the technical side. We also provide podcast training and an audit service if you already have a podcast. You're not sure where to take it to next. For more information or to book a call, visit ruralpodmedia.co.uk. That's ruralpodmedia.co.uk. After a delicious lunch, we all returned to the main hall, and as well as hearing from the hugely inspiring Paralympian Sammy Kinghorn about her story and journey in sport, we heard about two rural businesses that have experienced stratospheric growth. Tom Warner spoke about Warner's Distillery, and Jim Bloom, the founder of Warrendale Farms, spoke to Farmers Guardian editor Olivia Midgley about taking a small family business and growing it to a significant farming brand. I spoke to Jim at the end of the day, and I was particularly interested in his viewpoint on risk.
I actually think the whole business has been built on risk management, and it started out when we started contract fattening pigs for Cranswick, growing ducks for Cherry Valley. The whole idea was that we produced a consistent cash flow to prove to the banks that we were a worthy contender to lend money to. And I think we've deviated from that over the years in many ways, and I've come back to the realisation that we need to sell our products, have a long-term contract before we start producing something.
You also spoke about turnover versus profit, and actually I got the sense actually when you were speaking that there's something almost beyond the money here as to the reason why you do what you do, and you enjoy the challenge of growth.
Yeah, I mean, I've got quite a lot of favourite sayings. One is penny wise, pound foolish. You know, I enjoy that risk taking
process. But I think, of course, I've managed that in the way I've done it. So
this podcast is going out to rural business owners, but there's a lot of startup listeners, people who've started businesses last sort of maybe a year, maybe 2 years old. When it comes to taking risks, and we're in a different financial climate now than we were a couple of years ago, and certainly before COVID, what would you say to them?
I think you've got to look bigger. As if small rural businesses have to think about the bigger picture more. It's important actually to create turnover. It's not just about the profit you make, it's about the value of that business. So you do need turnover to create value. So you've got two elements. You've got that short-term profit that gives you a living, hopefully, but then you've got that value creation within that business.
And especially when it comes to injecting cash, one of the biggest expenses for a lot of people is bringing people in. And I mean, there's a lot of talk, certainly in farming and the broader rural sector as well, about finding good people. You mentioned that again today. How much of a struggle is it to find good people in the sector at the moment?
It's a massive problem, and you've got to factor that cost in and then pass that cost on. And with our cost of production linked contracts, that's obviously what we're having to do. It's with the egg business and the property business and the Wagyu business. So yeah, it's a massive problem. We try and bring graduates and trainees in at the bottom, but it's very, very difficult retaining those people. And actually a slight turnover is good for a business, but we don't like losing people. It's not something we really like at all. We try to keep people. We try to do everything we can to maintain a strong, healthy team. But sometimes you're just never going to do that. So you've got to give up. And it's not always just about money, is it? We do lots of things other than pay people a big salary. It's about that whole package.
But I mean, ultimately, looking at the bigger picture, you have some really exciting growth stats for the next 5 years. It's a very exciting place to be, and that enthusiasm and optimism for the business came through strongly when you were talking.
It's all about managing risk. We all know the added risks that farmers face with the weather, with disease, and a fickle customer. So, for us, it starts with building relationships with our customer, bringing them into our business, showing them what we do, showing them how difficult it is, and showing them the challenges. And we've developed cost of production linked contracts, which hopefully everybody in the chain wins.
That's nearly it for today. I want to thank Andy, Simon and the Cultivate team for having me and allowing me to record on the day. I also want to thank all the speakers and everyone who spoke to me on the day. Next time on Meet the Farmers, we'll be in the US, and I'll be speaking to Lauren Johnson in Colorado, where her family ranches around 250,000 acres of land. Yes, listeners. And on Rural Business Focus next week, we'll be asking why difficult times are important in life. If you haven't listened to whichever podcast you're not listening to, please check out Rural Business Focus or Meet the Farmers, and please also give us a review and a rating. It would be great to see a few more of those on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It honestly really helps in letting other people know that we exist, so I would really appreciate that. So that's next week, but for now I'll say goodbye and thank you very much for listening. I'll leave you with a brief interview with Hannah Goodwin from Goodwin Farms in Cheshire, who told me what she got from Cultivate. See you next time.
Hi, I'm Hannah Goodwin from Goodwin Farms. Here today with my husband. We have a number of dairy farms in South Cheshire and just wanted to take something away really from today. A big take back for us is that resilience is key in the business, not only day to day, going forwards, and it's the reaction, looking for the positive in everything, essentially.
And one positive to take away, is there any practical thing that you'll be doing, any change, whether that's a change in mindset or a practical change on the farm?
We're generally positive people. However, a big take-home message is, will it matter in 6 months' time? We're sort of a huge believer of there is a positive in everything, but it is in that split second of a decision being made or a reaction to a problem right there, and your firefighting is that you have that positive let's just wait a second, take it all in and go forward from there. And does it matter? No, it probably doesn't. Most of the time we think it matters hugely at that moment, but in 6 months' time will I remember it? Probably not.
Yeah, for me, I think that's a big one I'm taking away. That 6 months, does it really matter? Probably not.
No.
So just do what you want to do.
Definitely, 100%.